How did Mahatma Gandhi, one of the greatest icons of peace, die? This question has intrigued historians, political scholars, and people around the world for decades. Gandhi, who dedicated his life to non-violence and the fight for India's independence, met a tragic and violent end. His death was a stark contrast to everything he stood for: peace, reconciliation, and unity. But what exactly led to this unfortunate fate? Why would someone choose to assassinate the very man who preached harmony? In today's video, we're going to dive deep into the details of Gandhi's death, unraveling the mystery surrounding it, and exploring the complex political and social dynamics that led to this fateful moment. Stick with us until the end as we explore not just the events of that day, but also the motivations behind the killer's actions and the lasting impact of Gandhi's death on India and the world. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring more content like this to you. India's independence in 1947 marked a turning point in the nation's history. The long struggle against British colonial rule finally came to an end, and the country was free. However, the victory was bittersweet. The partition of India created two new nations, India and Pakistan, and left deep scars on the Indian subcontinent. The partition caused one of the largest mass migrations in history, with millions of people forced to leave their homes and travel across the newly drawn borders. It also triggered widespread violence, with Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs clashing in horrific bloodshed. In the midst of this turmoil, Mahatma Gandhi stood firm in his commitment to peace and non-violence. He believed that the only way to heal the wounds of partition was through reconciliation, particularly between Hindus and Muslims. He famously fasted, pleaded, and worked tirelessly to promote unity, even as the violence continued to escalate. Gandhi's stance was controversial to many, especially to the growing group of radical Hindu nationalists who felt that the Muslim community was an existential threat to the future of India. While Gandhi was hailed as the father of the nation by millions, not everyone in India agreed with his approach. The compromises he made in the name of peace, particularly his vocal support for the Muslim community, alienated a significant portion of the Hindu population. These tensions simmered beneath the surface, eventually contributing to the tragic events that unfolded on January 30th, 1948. On the fateful morning of January 30th, 1948, Mahatma Gandhi set out for his daily prayer meeting in New Delhi, just as he had done for years. Gandhi, frail and aging, walked with his customary calm, surrounded by a small group of followers. The city, still reeling from the recent aftermath of independence and partition, had seen its fair share of tensions, but Gandhi's presence had always been a symbol of peace. His prayer meetings had become a sanctuary for those seeking solace amid the violence that had gripped the country. As Gandhi arrived at the venue, a man approached him, Nathuram Godse, a Hindu nationalist with a deep-seated resentment toward the Mahatma. Godse had been an outspoken critic of Gandhi's conciliatory approach towards Muslims, and his hatred had grown over the years. He believed that Gandhi's efforts to promote peace and unity between Hindus and Muslims were weakening the strength of Hindu India. So on this day, he would make his feelings known in the most violent way possible. As Gandhi greeted the people gathered for the prayer, Godse, carrying a pistol, stepped forward. In an instant, he raised his weapon and fired 3 shots at point-blank range. The bullets struck Gandhi, who collapsed to the ground bleeding. The crowd, stunned and horrified, watched in disbelief as one of the greatest leaders of their time fell silent. The assassination was not just the death of a man, it was the loss of a symbol of peace. News of Gandhi's murder spread like wildfire across India and the world, leaving a collective sense of shock and grief. The man who had spent his life preaching non-violence had been taken from the world in the most violent manner possible. To understand the tragedy of Gandhi's assassination, it's crucial to look at the man responsible, Nathuram Godse. A Hindu nationalist and former member of the radical Hindu Mahasabha, Godse's views were starkly opposed to the values Gandhi upheld. He believed that Gandhi's consistent efforts to bring Hindus and Muslims together were damaging to the Hindu community and to India itself. Godse's background is rooted in his involvement with extremist organizations that sought to promote a Hindu-only India. His association with these groups, particularly the Hindu Mahasabha, fostered a growing resentment toward Gandhi's political stance. While Gandhi advocated for religious tolerance and unity, Godse viewed his actions as appeasing Muslims, especially during the contentious partition of India. Godse felt that Gandhi's negotiations with Muslim leaders and his support for their demands weakened the Hindu majority and emboldened Muslim separatism. As tensions within India increased following independence, Godse's anger toward Gandhi intensified. He believed that Gandhi had betrayed the Hindu cause, and his hatred was compounded by Gandhi's actions, such as the fast he undertook to stop Hindu violence against Muslims. Godse, along with several co-conspirators, saw Gandhi as the primary obstacle to their vision of a strong, undivided Hindu India. Despite the public image of Gandhi as a peacemaker, his influence and ideologies created a deep divide in the country. While many revered him as the father of the nation, radicals like Godse viewed him as a traitor. Godse's decision to take matters into his own hands reflected a larger political and ideological conflict that would ultimately cost Gandhi his life. Nathuram Godse's decision to assassinate Gandhi was not a spur-of-the-moment act, but the culmination of years of deep ideological conviction. Godse's motivation was driven by his unwavering belief that Gandhi's approach to Hindu-Muslim relations was weakening India, and specifically the Hindu community. He saw Gandhi as a man who was willing to make too many concessions to Muslims, believing that this appeasement was detrimental to the unity and strength of India. One of Godse's core grievances was Gandhi's stance during the partition of India in 1947. As the country was divided into India and Pakistan, violence erupted across the subcontinent. Gandhi's relentless calls for peace and his refusal to accept violence as a means of solving religious tensions angered many Hindus. He even went as far as fasting to stop Hindu attacks on Muslims, an act that was seen by extremists like Godse as a betrayal of the Hindu cause. For Godse, Gandhi's efforts to foster inter-religious harmony were weakening the strength and purity of the Hindu nation. He believed that Gandhi's insistence on appeasing Muslims was undermining the Hindu majority in India. Furthermore, Gandhi's leadership and public influence gave him immense power, and for many, especially radical nationalists, that power seemed misused in the pursuit of appeasement. Gandhi's refusal to support the more aggressive, militant factions of the Hindu community in favor of a peaceful resolution to India's religious violence was seen as a betrayal. Godse and his associates felt that India's future could only be secured through a stronger, more unified Hindu state, free from the influence of Muslim demands and the compromises Gandhi had made during the independence struggle. In Godse's eyes, Gandhi had become a symbol of the soft, pacifist ideals that were preventing India from achieving its true potential as a Hindu-majority nation. His assassination was, in his mind, the only way to remove this obstacle and pave the way for a stronger India based on Hindu supremacy. After the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, Nathuram Godse was quickly apprehended along with several of his co-conspirators. The investigation and subsequent trial that followed would expose the full extent of the conspiracy and give insight into the mindset of those responsible for the murder. Godse's trial became a moment of intense national and international scrutiny, not only for the shocking nature of the crime, but also for the stark political and ideological implications it carried. At his trial, Godse was unapologetic. He admitted to the murder and even justified his actions, stating that it was necessary for the greater good of the Hindu community. His defense was rooted in the same nationalistic ideology that had driven him to commit the crime in the first place. Godse argued that Gandhi's actions during the partition and his continued support for Muslims had undermined the welfare of Hindus, and that by assassinating Gandhi, he was performing a necessary act for the future of India. He claimed that Gandhi's policies of appeasement toward Muslims and his refusal to support the Hindu cause were compromising the integrity of the Indian state. Throughout the trial, Godse's fervent nationalism was on full display. He expressed no remorse for his actions, and his words were aimed at convincing the court and the nation that he had acted out of a sense of duty to protect the Hindu community. He viewed Gandhi's pacifist stance as an obstacle to India's true liberation, and in his eyes the assassination was a patriotic act. Despite Godse's defense, the court found him and his co-conspirators guilty of murder. Nathuram Godse, along with several others involved in the plot, was sentenced to death. His conviction and subsequent execution were deeply controversial. While many in India viewed Godse as a murderer who had unjustly taken the life of a national hero, there were also factions of the population who sympathized with his ideology. For some, Godse was a martyr who had acted in defense of Hinduism and the future of the nation. The trial of Nathuram Godse highlighted the deep divisions within Indian society in the wake of Gandhi's death. It underscored the ideological rift between the forces of non-violence and pacifism, championed by Gandhi, and the radical nationalism represented by Godse. Gandhi's assassination not only marked the tragic end of his life, but also signaled the beginning of a more complex and divisive era in Indian politics. The assassination of Mahatma Gandhi had profound and far-reaching consequences, both for India and for the world. The immediate aftermath of the tragedy saw an outpouring of grief and disbelief. Gandhi was not just a political leader, he was a symbol of peace, unity and non-violence. His death left a void in the heart of India and in the hearts of millions who had looked up to him as a beacon of hope during one of the most turbulent periods in the country's history. In India, the Sioux nation was plunged into mourning. Public demonstrations and tributes poured in from every corner of the country as people of all faiths and backgrounds came together to honor the man who had spent his life fighting for their freedom. Gandhi's death seemed to have a unifying effect, at least momentarily, as citizens of different communities reflected on the loss of a leader who had worked tirelessly to bridge the divides between Hindus and Muslims. It was a bitter irony that the very man who had devoted his life to fostering peace between these communities was killed in the midst of religious conflict. The shock and sorrow, however, were quickly followed by outrage. Gandhi's assassination reignited religious tensions in India. While many mourned his loss, others felt a sense of validation for the extreme views held by those like Nathuram Godse. Radical Hindu groups, who saw Gandhi's pacifism as a betrayal, began to gain more ground in the political landscape. The death of Gandhi, in some ways, created a dangerous vacuum, with ideological extremes gaining prominence on both sides of the religious divide. On the international stage, Gandhi's assassination sent shockwaves throughout the world. World leaders who had admired Gandhi for his commitment to non-violence and civil rights expressed their shock and grief. His death was felt globally, as it marked the loss of one of the 20th century's most influential figures. Leaders like US President Harry S. Truman and British Prime Minister Clement Attlee paid tribute to Gandhi, recognizing his contributions not only to Indian independence, but also to the global movement for peace and civil rights. In the years that followed, India and the world would continue to grapple with the repercussions of Gandhi's death. While his assassination did not bring an end to the values he championed, it did serve as a stark reminder of the challenges faced by those who advocate for peace in times of conflict. Gandhi's death also marked the beginning of a new chapter in India's political landscape, one that would be shaped by the tensions he sought to resolve, but now without his leadership and vision. Despite the tragic circumstances surrounding his death, Mahatma Gandhi's legacy continues to influence the world to this day. While his life was cut short, his teachings, his commitment to non-violence, and his tireless fight for social justice have left an indelible mark on history. Gandhi's ideas on civil disobedience, passive resistance, and the importance of self-reliance resonated far beyond India's borders, inspiring numerous leaders and movements across the globe. One of the most significant impacts of Gandhi's legacy can be seen in the civil rights movement in the United States. Figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks were deeply influenced by Gandhi's philosophy of non-violence and civil disobedience. King, in particular, adopted Gandhi's methods in the struggle for racial equality, believing that peaceful protest could bring about lasting change. The lessons of nonviolent resistance also inspired other global leaders, such as Nelson Mandela, who incorporated Gandhi's principles into his fight against apartheid in South Africa. Beyond political leaders, Gandhi's ideals of non-violence and peace continue to inspire individuals and groups who are working towards social change. Movements for racial equality, gender rights, and environmental justice have all drawn upon his teachings. His call for satyagraha, the pursuit of truth through non-violent means, has become a guiding principle for countless activists around the world. In India, Gandhi remains one of the most revered figures in the nation's history. Statues of him stand in cities and towns across the country, and his birthday, October 2nd, is observed as Gandhi Jayanti, a day of remembrance and reflection. The country's commitment to non-violence, democratic ideals, and social justice can be traced back to Gandhi's vision for a united and peaceful India. However, his legacy is not without controversy. Gandhi's efforts to promote peace and unity, especially among different religious communities, were not universally embraced during his lifetime, and the same is true today. There are still groups and individuals who reject his ideas of reconciliation, particularly when it comes to Hindu-Muslim relations in India. Some believe that Gandhi's approach was too conciliatory, while others argue that his refusal to compromise on principles of non-violence and justice ultimately led to his assassination. Regardless of these debates, it is clear that his influence remains profound, both in India and beyond. The values Gandhi championed, truth, non-violence, and self-reliance, continue to be relevant today. His legacy serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of peaceful resistance in the face of oppression, and his commitment to justice, equality, and humanity remains a source of inspiration for generations to come. The assassination of Mahatma Gandhi on January 30, 1948, remains one of the most defining moments in modern history. It was not just the loss of a leader, it was the loss of a philosophy, a vision for the world, and the ideals of peace and non-violence that Gandhi had spent his life championing. His death at the hands of Nathuram Godse, a radical who believed Gandhi's policies endangered Hindu nationalism, is a stark reminder of the powerful forces of ideological conflict that shape history. Gandhi's life, filled with sacrifices, struggles, and triumphs, had been a testament to the strength of peaceful resistance in the face of oppression. His principles of non-violence, truth, and self-reliance resonated across the globe, influencing movements for civil rights, independence, and social justice. Yet, his assassination also reveals the harsh reality of the political tensions and divisions that can exist even in the aftermath of great triumphs like independence. As the world moves forward, Gandhi's legacy continues to offer valuable lessons in how to confront hatred and division with love and understanding. While his death may have been a tragic and violent end to his remarkable journey, the teachings he left behind remain alive, motivating countless individuals and movements striving for a better, more peaceful world. In the end, Mahatma Gandhi's life was not defined by the violence of his death, but by the peace he sought to create during his lifetime. And though his physical presence was lost, his ideals, rooted in non-violence, truth, and compassion, remain as relevant today as they were when he first articulated them. His assassination, a brutal and heartbreaking moment in history, could never erase the enduring impact of the life he lived and the vision he shared with the world. As we reflect on Gandhi's life and his tragic death, let us remember that while he may have fallen victim to violence, the message he shared continues to echo through the ages: the power of non-violence and the belief in the possibility of a better world for all people, regardless of race, religion, or nationality.